I have with me 4 school counselors from Algona School District, and I'm not great with names. I know Christy because she was my contact, but if we could just kind of go around the horn here, and we'll start over here.
Noel McLaughlin, school counselor at Algona High School.
Okay.
I'm Julie Stein, and I'm also at Algona High School.
Okay.
I'm Christy Roberts, and I'm the elementary school counselor.
And Colleen Bowman, I'm the middle school counselor.
So each of you, if you could just kind of give me a sense of not only what you do, but the kinds of kids that you work with and the kinds of issues that you see.
We have students in our office for personal issues all day long, especially this year, I would say.
Really, why is that, do you think?
I don't know exactly. I think it's a result of COVID. We also have sometimes we have a lot of awareness things with mental health, which is great, but a lot of times that brings us more business, so to speak, because kids are more aware of their mental health than they ever have been before.
So they'll hear something in something that you're doing with an awareness type of event, and they'll say, "Oh, that's me."
Yep.
And all of a sudden they're on your doorstep.
Or that's my friend.
Or that's my friend.
Or that's my friend. Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
A lot of
my.
that,
Oh,
yep.
my. And what kinds of things do you run into? I'm sure it's soup to nuts.
I'll let these guys answer too, but a lot of anxiety right now, just about everything.
I would even say relationship issues right now, healthy relationships. I think the lack of structure that we've had in the last year. Julie mentioned 50 students were remote. Those students didn't have a structure of a school, they had a structure of the home. In some cases, those were good things, but a lot of cases, I would say very few were good structure and successful with that. Most of those were not, and so we're missing out on those relationships right now, healthy relationships, and how to deal with problems. And so as they feel these issues, these problems, the stress, the anxiety word comes out, and then it's, I don't know what to do, and I need help. And it's a variety of things, whether it's...
I think it's a lot of uncertainty because things did change a year and a half ago unexpectedly, and students are like, is this going to happen again?
Yeah.
So I don't know what to expect anymore.
Yeah.
You know, we had more kids than ever last year not go to college.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Wow.
And so we're trying to kind of work on that, but there's just a lot of uncertainty.
I would say, when you brought up anxiety, it comes all the way down to elementary. You know, we were talking about that the other day, just, why and what and how, and I think our kids also feel it in brothers and sisters and parents. Like, it's not necessarily like for the 8-year-old to have it, what's going on in his life, but it's what he sees.
Sure.
Parents that lost a job or can't pay bills, or a brother or sister who's struggling and now they're fighting parents and older brother or sister. So I think that is huge at the elementary too, and dealing with that.
That's really interesting because younger kids, they can't always put words to it, but they are so perceptive. They feel it.
They feel it.
They don't know why or what's happening necessarily,
Right.
but they know what's happening.
Right. We have a lot of stomach aches, a lot of headaches in the elementary because that's how they feel it. And they, and they think they're sick, and it is like they're sick,
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but they may have a lot going on at home where it's just stemming from that too. So.
Almost like soul sickness, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and
Yeah, the anxiety, it permeates. Listening to you guys talk, that is so true. And within the family dynamics, it can cause a lot of stress.
I
So,
guess.
a lot of stress.
And I'm going to add this device also. When we were in quarantine, this device was still there for all of us.
Right.
And the use of this device, I believe, has gone up. And that's what's doing our parenting, is this device. That's what's educating us. That's what's filling our time. And this isn't the interactions peer-to-peer that humans need, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But this has been constant for us, for all of us.
Yeah.
And it's not the educational piece that a young person, elementary, middle school, even high school, and so it can be used in a negative way.
It's
also.
not a healthy connection.
It's not a healthy
It is not a
connection.
healthy connection.
It's not the healthy connection
Yeah,
that,
that we
that
want.
we need.
Yeah. Say more about that.
The healthy connection, I mean, just seeing people's expressions, you don't get that when, you're on a computer and a laptop.
Right.
And, and that just, I think it wrecks communication. It really does, and.
Isn't that interesting?
We see it, I guess, I feel like we see it all the time, where things are misconstrued, misunderstood, and then it blows up into something it shouldn't have,
Yeah,
so.
yeah, what a paradox. The very thing that is supposed to enhance
Help
communication
communication, yeah.
is the thing that destroys communication.
It can, it
Wow,
can.
Well,
wow.
I think even at your age of kids, that's hard anyway.
Mhm.
Like, people to people was hard anyway at the middle school, and now we take out that face-to-face,
Right.
and we take out the hearing the voice,
Right.
and
Yeah,
it just makes it harder.
Yeah.
And it's much easier to
yeah,
be mean for
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
And,
Right.
yeah,
And if it's
not be
written and you
accountable.
save it, you see it over and over and over,
Right.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, how young are kids getting phones? How young are the kids?
A lot of fifth graders have them.
Third grade,
Really?
yeah.
Okay.
Not as much, I think a lot in fourth grade. We get Snapchat is starting in fourth grade, which is hard, because again, then it creates groups, it creates that ability to now I can contact you later at night.
And leave others out.
And leave others out, and the mean, and then, I hate saying that it's all negative, because there's some good to it too. I
Yeah.
mean, it does create that ability to communicate a little bit, but sometimes it just feels like it's too young, or the problems are getting created too young, too
Yeah.
early.
And I think,
You know.
as we talk about anxiety tying to this,
Uh-huh.
communication, lack of interaction, but also sleep patterns.
Yeah.
Sleep
Oh,
patterns. When I hear of young kids, what's a respectable bedtime, and is your phone distracting you? Are you able to go to sleep? Does your phone sit next to you? And how late does it ding at you? And
Video games.
you have to see it's that instant. Who's sending me a message? It can't wait for till tomorrow. I have to reply, and it's late at night. And so our students at the high school are tired, and anxiety and stress
Sure.
that comes with it. We hear a lot of kids, I'm up all night. I didn't get much sleep last night.
Yeah.
And so education and learning is down the line. Survival is up the line.
Really?
And that's, a lot of kids, like I said, are playing video games all night.
Wow.
And, students in my office and they're crying, that's usually the first thing I ask them, how much sleep did you get last night?
Yeah.
Their emotions are so tied to sleep. I mean, it's a basic need.
Yeah.
And a lot of our kids aren't getting enough sleep.
Well, again, hello. By the way, I have to tell you, this was about a 35-minute conversation. We're going to see a little bit more a little later, because they're talking about a program that they have at the school that probably most of you have not heard of. It's something called A.S.C. And we'll hear a little bit more about that later. But I have to tell you that that was just such a fascinating conversation. Man, the kids in this community are in some really good hands. These four people, I mean, the entire school staff, right? But these four people, it's more than a job, it's a way of life, and they care very deeply about the children that they work with, as do all teachers. But these guys are on the front lines of, what's going wrong in life for them, for the kids. And I just found that so interesting and so enlightening. So we've been in this sermon series here called The Face of Christ. And just a little review, we started out with Beacon of Hope. From there we went to RIP Medical. Beacon of Hope is, of course, the men's shelter that we work with. RIP Medical, we've done some things to relieve a lot of medical debt for some folks in Tennessee. We've got Meals of Hope, and of course this Wednesday we're doing that. And then there's the other stuff, like the thank offering stuff this last weekend. My goodness, we were in here on Wednesday, and one of the kids came up and said, "What's all that stuff up there?" And so they found out it was school supplies, and they saw the blankets as well, and they said, "Well, where are the school supplies going?" Well, all over the world. We've got the Lotus community, that's the women's shelter we deal with. We get the disaster bucket going, and I could go on and on and on and on, right? And we do all of these things kind of regionally and nationally and even internationally. But as you can see from that video, that there's a real mission right here as well. And it's an important mission, so very important. Because, you look at these kids, and just like everybody else, they just look normal as normal can be, but they're dealing with all kinds of things. And I mean, who knew that COVID, a year and a half later, would create that kind of an upset with a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old? I didn't see that one coming, did you? Not to mention high schoolers. I mean, it's just disrupting lives like crazy. And there is an anxiety about all that. And by the way, let me just say this, depression. Depression is what happens when you can't get past the past, when you can't put the past behind you, okay? Anxiety is what happens when you look at the future and it seems so uncertain, okay? That's an important distinction. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And I didn't even think about this when it happened, but I shortly after this, or maybe it was just before this conversation, I was here on Wednesday night, and as I always am, and I was working, kind of getting the last touches on what I was going to say Wednesday night, and I opened the door to my study, came out to grab a cup of water, or the drinking fountain there, and there's this boy, and he's about 8, 9 years old, I don't know exactly. And he's out there all by himself because everybody else is down here still eating, and it's about 10 minutes away from, the pell-mell that happens at 6 o'clock here. And so I go get some water, and he comes over and he stands beside me. And I said, "So are you waiting for a drink?" He said, "No." And he just stood there and looked at me and smiled at me. And I said, "Well, he wants to talk." So we got into a conversation, and at first it was, just so-so, just kind of talking, and then he started telling me about some of the problems that he's facing and how big they are for him. And then about that time, we didn't get very far into it, just a little dabs here and there. About that time, a couple of his friends come shooting down the hall, and he's off and away, and everything looks just perfectly happy, right? Just because that's what they do, right? And I didn't even think about it at the time, but later on I realized that he was reaching out for help. He was just looking for somebody to listen to him. I think that's our call as Christians, right? So it's our call, and it's what we do out there in the region and in the world and in the nation. That's important. It's a big component of what we are and who we are. But there's also the hands-on work that has to happen here as well. And it is hands-on work. We can't just pass it off to somebody else. This is a community issue, dealing with the anxiety of our children and the anxiety of each other as well, because we're all experiencing it in some way, shape, or form. So I'd like to stop here for right now, but before I do, I'm just going to leave you with this question, and we'll come back here in just a minute. What is not just First Lutheran's role in this, but what is your role in this? Because we all have one. Let's sing. So the lesson, and by the way, Pam, thank you for reading today. We're a little short-staffed here. Shelley's away for the weekend, and I'm a little short-staffed myself. Last night I got home. I felt good all day. I was out hunting. I got a pheasant, and I got home about 8 o'clock, and I sat down to start jotting the last of my notes for this. And the post-COVID booster shot nailed me. I mean, nailed me. It started, I was looking at the paper, I couldn't even see the crazy paper. And then the chills came. And then the fatigue came. And by 9 o'clock, I was underneath like 4 blankets and going to bed. So I'm still feeling a little bit, so if I'm a little bit off today, please understand. And if you don't see me after church, it's because I'm going back to my blankets, okay? So the lesson that Pam read, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get off on that tangent. Lesson that Pam read, I'd like to, would you please put the slide up? I'd like to read this together, okay? Read it with me, please. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Please leave that up for the rest of this section, if you would, please. So, I don't know about you, but to me, this is a very familiar passage. We hear it all the time. They used to have it on posters, right? Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. And for most folks, when they read that, they just stop there, and it's this nice sounding little phrase, right? But to stop there misses the point, because Paul goes on. This is written, by the way, it's written by St. Paul, and you all know who St. Paul is, right? He's not one of the disciples. He comes a little bit after. He doesn't actually meet the physical Jesus. He meets Jesus later on, after Jesus has been resurrected and ascended. But he is the most important of all of the followers of Jesus in that first century. He's the reason we're here, because without him, Christianity is just is a Jewish sect. I'm not saying that's all bad, but there wouldn't be any Gentiles doing this without Paul. And so Paul writes these things, but then he goes on to tell us in chapter 12 and part of chapter 13, he goes on to tell us what that living sacrifice means and what that transformation means. Okay? And he talks about genuine love of others. He talks about taking my needs and my wants and my desires and putting them beneath the wants and needs and desires of others. He talks about care for the brothers and sisters in Christ, care for all people. He talks about befriending the lowly. He talks about the mercies that we are called to be. That's the sacrifice. That's the transformation. And let me just stop here, because you see the red up here. It's Reformation Sunday, right? This is the time when the church gets reformed. We remember that. But it's more than just the church. It's our individual hearts, because all throughout history, when it comes to religious faith, we tend to over time, find a way to turn something that is a matter of the heart into something that is a matter of rules. Okay? So I could imagine some of us sitting there, and as we're hearing about the phone, just shaking our head and saying, what is our world coming to? And why can't parents just get in touch and take charge of their homes and take charge of their families? That's all good and fine, but that's not what we're called to do. We're not called to be judge over folks and the way they parent. We're called to love people who are hurting. And that's the transformation. It's really a reformation of the heart. And it's not once for all time. It didn't happen just in 1517, and it didn't happen just in the first century when Paul comes along. It happens to us every single day when we are called back to the true meaning and the true purpose of our religious faith. All right? This is so important, folks, because we get a bad name, Christians do, because folks see us as rule makers. And then we contribute to the bad name by hanging on to rules. And there's nothing wrong with rules as long as the rules are subservient to the heart. And the heart is what matters. So do not be conformed to this world. Be transformed. Be changed by the renewal of your minds. You don't stand above. You come from beneath. You don't pretend to love. You really love. You weep with those who weep. You rejoice with those who rejoice. And the lowly are your best friends. That's what we're called to be and do. And that's hard work. It's much easier to send it away. And we need to send it away. That's good things to do. But it's hard work. Because, I look across this congregation, and I look over Wednesday night, and I see a bunch of happy, well-adjusted people. Don't you? Well, maybe not me, but maybe everybody else, okay? Are they? My little boy. Not so sure. I don't know if you remember, but it's about 3.5 years ago now, my first sermon here. We talked about the iceberg. Yeah, somebody just said iceberg. Yes. Yeah. Remember, 90%, what you see of people, that happy, well-adjusted stuff is about 9.8% of what they really are. And beneath that waterline is a whole great big iceberg of stuff that nobody ever sees. And it's hard work to get at that. And frankly, it blindsides you. Several years ago, I was in a different church, and there was a woman in the church. She and her husband were retirement age, and they had talked about going and doing some things and traveling a little bit, but she couldn't pull herself away because she had confirmation kids to feed. And so every Wednesday afternoon, she would come in. She brought the groceries. Sometimes she paid for the groceries herself. She prepared a hot meal. The confirmation kids came in, and she fed them. And she took care of them. And, it made her happy. And it gave her life a sense of purpose beyond who she really is. And so she'd do that. And she was in the church a lot, not just on Wednesdays, but on other days as well. And every once in a while, we'd get into a conversation. And it was mostly breezy and nice. Once in a while, she'd say, from time to time, Pastor Dave, I deal with a little anxiety. And we'd talk about that for a minute or two, then she'd very quickly move on to the next topic, and I thought, well, this is managed in pretty good shape. It was a Saturday afternoon in August, and I got a phone call late afternoon from her husband. He had been away for the day, and she went into her bedroom, took a load of pills, and went to sleep. 10%. 9.8%. Happy, well-adjusted, normal. Just full of joy and full of love and finding purpose in her life. And then there's this big monster down below that no one ever sees. And you know something? That was her. And I know something else. That's you. And if you don't know it, it's also me. And we are called to find ways to connect to people, to get to know that 90-some-odd%, so that they never feel alone, so that they always feel love. Maybe it happens back here at coffee after church. Maybe it happens at work, or you're out shopping and you see someone. I've told you that before. For the longest time, I could never go to the grocery store because I couldn't get past the produce aisle. Somebody would stop me, and then all of a sudden we'd be talking, and it was they were laying out their deep dark secrets, right around the apples and the onions, and maybe it's there, and maybe it's in a nursing home, maybe it's over a cup of coffee, maybe it's at the school with what these counselors are doing. It's who we all are. It is our common experience as human beings. And in that, Paul says, read it with me, do not be conformed to this world. Read it with me. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Stand beneath those around you. Put their needs ahead of yours. Make your love genuine. Rejoice with those who are rejoicing. Weep with those who weep. And those who are the lowliest, make them your friends. Feed your enemies. Feed your enemies. Give them a drink of water. Always repay evil with good. Let's sing. So you folks have something called Project A.S.C.
Yep.
And that stands for Algona Schools Cares.
Yep.
A.S.C.
A.S.C.
Algona Schools Care.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about that, because that's really how you came to my attention. I'd heard through some friends that belonged to 100 Women that you guys were a beneficiary, and I'm thrilled about that.
Yep.
Yeah, I bet you are.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about what Project A.S.C. does.
It's teachers helping support students who have needs that aren't being met. Part of what we do is when a student is referred, and a student can be referred by any teacher, any school employee, we first kind of evaluate, is there another group already in town that would fulfill this need? And so that's why we are kind of the gatekeepers, because we have access to all those, that knowledge. And so we check that out first, and then it kind of goes to a committee, and then we decide if we can handle the expense. And so we buy everything from tennis shoes for basketball to glasses. We've bought a lot of eyeglasses for people. We've done grocery cards for families in need. We've done a lot of gas cards. Maybe if somebody's ill and they have to travel, we help with that. What else?
In a few circumstances, we paid rent, we paid electrical
rent.
bills.
Wow.
And they're really basic needs that it's not to fix it
No.
long-term necessarily, it's,
Right.
you know, we don't have the funds for
It's a-
that.
It's a stopgap.
It's
Yeah.
a stopgap to
Yeah.
say, hey, how can we support you? And sometimes it's just knowing my school does support me. That's-
Medicine.
Medicine,
yeah,
medication,
yeah,
we've done that.
Wow.
So it's nice to have that ability when
Yes.
something comes to us from a teacher, and that's, the teachers are our eyes and ears. When we hear about this, it's nice to have the ability to say, we can help.
Yeah.
And I think we have great resources in Algona. I work with Care Team a lot, food pantry, and like Julie said, when we look at other resources, it's not just so we don't do it, but it can give a connection then to that family, so.
And it's
their
not
project
always
lasts.
based on, you know, the financial stability of a family. Sometimes there's trauma. And we need to be that support during their times of trauma. And so it can be for just people in need,
Give me an example, trauma, what do you mean?
a death in a family.
Okay.
Someone gets some bad medical news and they're gonna be on the road a lot.
Mhm.
And maybe it's a family that financially that's not gonna put them out. But they
Right.
still need that support. And so it might be Casey's gas cards.
Sure.
That just say, hey, you've got a lot of people still thinking about you. And
Right.
it's not necessarily the dollar amount, but it's just the support that probably can carry that group, you know, a little bit further along, knowing they have people praying for them and thinking of them.
Absolutely.
And I remember a situation last year where we gave, I think it was a maybe $300 gas card to a family. And they ended up, they donated, I don't know how they did it, if they just got cash, and they had stayed at the Ronald McDonald House. They just donated that amount to the Ronald McDonald House, because that's
Cool.
where I thought, it gives me goosebumps just talking about it, so.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they were just so appreciative, it's like, no, and I said, no, we wanna do this for you,
Yeah.
and that's what they ended up doing.
You know, there's something about, first of all, there's something about giving that changes you.
Mhm.
But then there's also something about receiving that, I mean,
Can change a person.
it can change a person, absolutely,
We've
absolutely.
had people that we've helped, and they have, when they've been back on their feet, they've helped us back.
Okay,
So it's, yeah,
wow, that's
full
neat.
circle.
That's neat,
Yep.
yeah. So, I don't know if y'all know this or not, but when I first came, we partnered up with a kindergarten class over at Bertha. And of course, COVID pulled the plug on that. And we've yet to, you guys you're still finding your sea legs after this. And we are as well. I'm hoping that we can do that again.
I just think it's important in a time when we were separated to come back together and feel like you belong, and we're missing that right now.
Yeah.
And that, you know, financially, we're in a situation right now, we've received some nice dollars, but we're always trying to figure out how we can grow and be proactive. I think of getting kids into activities in our school, whether it's activity passes now that they can go to games again. The Booster Club meals, hey, here's $10 that you can use at a game just because people are caring about you. Bringing kids back together, we'll find the ways to do that. And so that's ways I think we're trying to combat this pandemic after a pandemic.
Yeah.
If you want to really call it something.
Yeah.
With feeding our lives with relationships and a place to belong to.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's good too, like, that's a great thing that we need to look forward to or look towards doing more of, even like the movie night that we had at the football field. Like, I think that is that connection again, like
Sure.
this family stuff that isn't just the normal, you know, once you get stuck at home, you get stuck in the, okay, well, this one's on in their room, this one's in their room, but when you have that stuff to go and do, and it can just be coming up basketball games, the
Yeah.
wrestling meets, you know, but that's things that you can do as a family. I think we need to remember those and get back to that, because I
Absolutely.
think we are. I think we're away from that. It's too easy to separate. It's too easy
Yeah.
to just stay home. That made it really, I mean,
Yeah.
made it really easy to just do everything on Zoom. You know, you don't
Yeah.
have to leave.
Yeah.
So I think those ideas are things that we need to keep coming up with, is what gets us
Absolutely.
out, you
Yeah,
know.
that's
together.
really, really interesting. And you're absolutely right, we get stuck in patterns. don't we?
Mhm.
And it's a comfortable place, and to expand out of it is, just requires a little courage. And some encouragement. And maybe that's where parents can be leaders in their homes a little bit better. So Where do you see A.S.C going in the future? Have you thought about that at all?
I know I've told these guys I want to do more of resources for parenting. There's something, I've been looking at like grief bags, so when somebody's gone through something, a trauma, something like that, here's this pack to help parents with some books, with some resources, you know, what we can do. That's kind of my kind of go-to, what I'm kind of looking for at the elementary level. And we all have such very different needs at each of our buildings, so.
How about at your building?
Well, I'm not piggybacking off, but something as you were talking, I wish that more people knew about us. Because when I talk to people about it, they're like, what's that? And I wish, because I think that would just help us.
Awareness.
Exactly,
Yeah.
help us get more out there. A lot of people don't know about it. I'm like, what's
right.
Project A.S.C?
Yeah, well, I didn't know
And it's a
until
great program.
I heard about
Yeah.
300 women,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's a fabulous
So-
That
program.
was a good
Yeah.
commercial for us.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was, it
There were
was.
a lot of women there that,
Yeah.
that
Yes.
didn't know about it, but they
That's
were
right.
heavily involved.
Yep.
Well, let me just say this. First Lutheran is ready to go with anything you need, but we need to know what it is. So don't be afraid to ask.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
No pun intended.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Thanks, folks. So how many of you, raise your hand, how many of you knew about A.S.C? Just a few here. Well, and yeah, and some of you do. Good. Most of you were in the school, though, right? I had no idea that the thing existed, and it is it's an amazing program. So it starts with our 90%. And the fact that Jesus sees that in us. And he loves us, and he cares for us. He rejoices when we rejoice. He weeps with us when we weep. He sees us in our lowliness, and he becomes our best friend. He puts his needs beneath our needs, and it changes us. We have a great, great school here with great, great professional staff. They can't do it all. What happens here on Wednesday night, my friends, is so important. I mean, she talked about grief bags, which is a great thing, right? We talk about eternal life, which is an even greater thing. We give tools that the school can't give to kids and to adults who, well, their 90% generally just doesn't get addressed by anyone. What happens here on Wednesday night, what happens here on Sunday morning, what happens here throughout the week is so important. And for you folks here on Sunday morning, when you go out that door, you take it with you. And remember that every person you see, you're only seeing 10%. Let me say this again as well. This is not for somebody else to do. It's for you to do. What's First Lutheran's role? What is your role?